Hello, welcome to Skep Vet TV. I'm Dr. Brendan McKenzie and I'm the Skep Vet. It's wintertime here in California. The temperature could dip dangerously low into the 50s or even the 40s, but I'm prepared. I have my Ravenclaw scarf and I'm ready for winter. So today I want to talk about one of the most controversial subjects in veterinary medicine, which is raw diets for dogs and cats. Food is a form of love. It's a way we express affection for our pets. Food is also something that we as pet owners have control over, and we know that nutrition is an important aspect of health. All of this creates a really significant pressure on us as pet owners to do the right thing, to find the right food to feed our pets. And unfortunately, this pressure can lead us to making extreme or irrational decisions about our feeding choices. In humans, there is a disorder which is growing in acceptance called orthorexia. It means an obsession with finding the right or the perfect food to eat for health. So the idea that nutrition is an important influence on health is certainly true, but the idea that we can find a food to feed our dogs and cats that will eliminate all disease and guarantee a healthy life simply isn't reality. And unfortunately, the pressure that we feel as pet owners to do this can lead us down the wrong path. Raw diets are based on several key ideas or assumptions, and I want to address each of these in turn. Obviously, it's a complicated subject, and so I won't be able to cover it in great detail in this video. I do have a lot more information about the subject in my book. I have, in fact, an entire chapter on alternative nutrition strategies, and there are a number of articles on my blog as well, the Skep Vet blog, which will discuss this in more detail. The three basic ideas used to promote the concept of feeding raw foods are that it is natural and somehow appropriate for dogs and cats as species because it is what they are designed or evolved to eat. Second, that commercial diets, cooked commercial diets, kibble, canned food, that sort of thing, are unhealthy, terrible junk food that will harm our pets. And third, there are a lot of anecdotes that people will provide that suggest that raw diets may be beneficial. You may hear someone say, well, my dog had terrible allergies and I switched to this diet and now their skin is perfect. So I want to address each of these subjects in turn. First, the concept that raw diets are natural and that this should be an argument in their favor. The idea that something is natural is actually a really complicated topic. It's very difficult to define what natural really means. It may mean, to some extent, little or no influence or manipulation by human beings, but it becomes very difficult at some point to say exactly how much handling of something by people makes it no longer natural. The idea that simply cooking food is unnatural seems intuitive, but of course it's something that has been done by human beings since before recorded history, and so at what point does that become a natural behavior? It's difficult to say. But in any case, the bigger problem is that we think somehow that natural implies something is healthy or safe or good for us. And that's simply not true. There are plenty of things in nature that are obviously and terribly unhealthy for us. Salmonella and E. coli and uranium, asbestos is completely natural. All sorts of things that exist in the natural world are harmful. And there are plenty of things that are artificial, that are clearly manufactured by human beings, but which are clearly beneficial for us. I've already discussed vaccines in great detail, and though they certainly have some risks, as I mentioned, they are one of the most effective public health measures for both humans and animals ever devised. Antibiotics and other medicines, surgery, all of these things are clearly unnatural, but they're certainly good for us and better than not having them. So the argument that something is natural in and of itself doesn't say anything about whether that thing is safe or healthy or appropriate. Beyond that, I think in the case of dogs, it's fairly clear that a raw diet, a diet made up of essentially killed wild animals, isn't really natural in any meaningful sense. Dogs are not wolves. If you've ever seen a pack of Yorkshire Terriers or pugs chase down an elk and tear it limb from limb, then good for you, but that's pretty unlikely. Dogs have been subject to a great deal of intensive artificial selection by human beings, and they differ from wild carnivores in their GI tracts and in their dentition or their teeth, in the enzymes that they use to digest food, in many, many other ways. So dogs are not wolves, and even if a natural diet might be raw prey for a wolf, it's certainly not a natural diet for dogs. They are well suited, after tens of thousands of years of living with humans, to eating very similar things to what human beings eat, and that's what they are best adapted to. Now, cats are certainly much less intensively affected by domestication than dogs are, and one could make the argument that because cats readily hunt and kill prey, that this is natural for them and might be healthy or appropriate. However, it's important to point out that predators in the wild don't eat the perfect food designed exactly for their long-term health. In fact, wild predators frequently suffer from malnutrition and parasites and trauma or injuries from their prey and broken teeth from chewing on bones. So even if one makes the argument that this diet is natural for cats, wild cats don't live as long and are not as healthy and suffer more from infections and parasites than well-cared for domestic cats. So if you want to promote the notion of raw diets as something that is natural, with the implication that means safe and healthy, I think that's a bit of a mistake to begin with. It's not clear what natural exactly means in the first place. It's not clear that these are natural diets, at least for dogs, and it's not clear that a natural diet, if such a thing exists, is actually the best, safest, or healthiest diet. The second major argument made in favor of raw diets is that commercial cooked foods are unnatural or unhealthy, that they are junk food served in bags just like potato chips, and the idea that they should be good for our pets is ridiculous. There are a lot of misconceptions to unpack here, and again, it's hard to go into enough detail to really get through all of them. The important thing to understand is that there's a big difference between snack foods for humans, convenience foods like potato chips and Twinkies, and commercial pet foods. Snack foods in humans are designed primarily to taste good and to be cheap and to be easy to ship and market and sell. There's not really much effort put into the nutrition behind those kinds of foods. Commercial pet foods are entirely different. They have been researched in detail for decades to find out what nutrients are important and what forms they should come in, and to make foods that are in fact intended to be healthy long-term sources of nutrition. So simply coming in a can or a bag doesn't make something junk food. Commercial pet foods are often very well designed and tested to be safe and healthy. Now that's not to say they don't have risks like anything else. There are recalls sometimes for contamination with infectious organisms. There's this unfortunate case where a supplier in China substituted a healthy ingredient with an unhealthy toxin, and a number of animals were injured by that. But these are all cases of tens of millions of animals around the world living long, healthy lives on these foods, and occasional mistakes or problems developing with them that are unfortunate and that we need to work hard to prevent. All of that said, no evidence at all that raw diets are safer or healthier than commercial diets. The other major source of evidence put forward for the benefits of raw diets are anecdotes, stories people tell about experiences they've had with feeding a raw diet and seeing a change in their pet's health. These are always very psychologically persuasive. It's really difficult to hear someone say, well, I did this and this happened, and so clearly this must have caused that, and not to believe that, not to see the logic in that. Unfortunately, anecdotes in general are a terribly unreliable guide to what's safe and healthy and works in medicine. There are a lot of complicated reasons for this. It's a subject I write about in detail in my book. There are a number of articles I'll link to in the description below that help explain this in more detail. But essentially, it's very easy for us to be fooled. Life is complicated, health is complicated, many things are happening at the same time, and we choose to focus on one and give that the blame or the credit for something that occurs, when realistically, that's not a reliable guide to what's actually causing the change that we see. For most of human history, we've relied on stories like this to tell us how to treat health and disease. Bloodletting was a widely practiced medical therapy. All the best minds in the world thought this was a safe and healthy way to treat infections and cancers and nutritional diseases and all sorts of things. And it was not only not helpful, it was actually actively harmful. And it took controlled scientific research to show us that. The same is true for nutrition. Despite the anecdotes that you may hear, there is no controlled scientific research showing that there are any benefits at all to raw diets. And there are many studies showing that there are risks, which I will discuss in a minute. So in terms of the evidence regarding raw diets, apart from anecdotes, there really is no evidence to support the claims made that raw diets are safe and healthy. The argument that they are natural and that this must mean they're healthy is one that I've already explained is not really a reliable or sound argument. Anecdotes are not a reliable or trustworthy way to decide if something is healthy. So what we really need is controlled scientific research, and there's very, very little. I've linked to a few articles below that discuss some research looking at raw diets. There are some interesting findings in terms of changes in the microbiome or the bacteria that live in the gut of dogs and cats, but there really is no evidence at all to suggest that raw diets are truly healthy or better than commercial or cooked foods, or that they have any protective benefits whatsoever. What there is extensive evidence to show is that raw diets are dangerous. They have a number of dangers. Commercial raw diets that are properly formulated are often nutritionally at least complete or balanced, but many of the raw diets that people use are homemade, based on recipes they may get from a book or online, and many of those are simply not nutritionally balanced. They run the risk of creating deficiencies that can harm your pet. Bones are often a component of raw diets, and there's good evidence that bones cause teeth to fracture and harm the GI tract and poke holes in the GI tract, which can be life-threatening. Even wild carnivores suffer from fractured teeth and a number of other sorts of harms that can come from trying to chew on raw bones. And certainly our dogs and cats, who are, particularly in the case of our dogs, not wild animals at all, but selected and domesticated, are not really suited to eating those. Finally, the most important risk of raw diets is the risk of infection and parasites. There's a reason why we cook our food. There's a reason why we don't eat raw food ourselves. It's not because of our evolutionary history. At some point our ancestors would have eaten raw food before fire was discovered and cooking was discovered. But raw food contains bacteria that can be harmful to us and parasites that can infest our bodies and hurt us. And the same is true for our dogs and cats. They don't have some miraculous natural resistance to infection, despite some people claiming that. It's simply not true. There are many, many cases and many studies showing that raw diets are much more likely to carry infectious organisms than cooked diets, that pets eating raw diets are much more likely to carry and to shed dangerous organisms, and that in fact humans and our pets have been killed by infectious diseases carried by raw food. So the fact is that the evidence is lacking to show any benefits to these diets, but it is clear that they have significant risks. So what's the bottom line? The bottom line is that the arguments you hear about the benefits of raw diets are not supported by any real evidence. The claims made for them are simply based on anecdotes or on really not very sound theories about what is safe and natural and healthy for our pets, and there isn't any controlled research to support those claims. There is, however, significant research that raw diets can cause infections and can lead to parasitism and can be harmful to our pets and to humans living with our pets. So at this point in time, the potential benefits are unproven at best, and the risks are significant. So I don't think that there's a good reason to consider a raw diet for your pet. Raw diets are almost certainly more risk than benefit for your pet. Thank you. I hope this has been useful, and I'll see you next time.